The blood pooled beneath her broken body in the dirt, mixing with the dust of the Colorado prairie until it turned into a crimson mud that clung to her torn dress. Helena Hayes lay crumpled behind the barn where her husband had left her after his fists had finally done what his words had threatened for 3 years, and the August sun of 1878 beat down mercilessly as her life drained away into the thirsty earth. She tried to draw breath, but each attempt sent lightning bolts of agony through her ribs, and the world had begun to fade around the edges like an old photograph left too long in the sun. Harrison Wright had been riding for 2 days straight, leading a small herd of cattle toward Victor, Colorado, when he spotted the vultures circling in the distance. He was 26 years old, weathered by the sun and hardened by years of working ranches across the territory, and he knew what circling vultures meant out here on the plains. Something was dying or already dead. He urged his horse forward, leaving the cattle to graze while he investigated, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle at his saddle. What he found made his stomach turn. A woman lay motionless in a spreading pool of blood, her face so swollen and bruised he could barely make out her features. Her dress was torn, revealing more bruises along her arms and chest, and one leg was bent at an unnatural angle. For a moment, Harrison thought he was too late, that death had already claimed her. But then he saw the faint rise and fall of her chest. "Christ almighty," he muttered, dismounting in one fluid motion. He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands hovering uncertainly over her battered body. "Madam? Madam, can you hear me?" Helena's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy with pain. She tried to speak, but only a wet gurgling sound emerged. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. Harrison had seen men die before. He had fought in the tail end of the Civil War as a young man, barely 18, and he recognized the signs of someone slipping away. But something in those pain-filled eyes made him refuse to accept it. He stripped off his jacket and pressed it against the worst of the bleeding at her side, where it looked like she had been kicked repeatedly. With his free hand, he pulled his canteen from his belt. "I'm going to help you," he said firmly, as much to convince himself as her. "You're not dying today. Do you understand me? You're going to live." He tipped water carefully into her mouth, watching as she struggled to swallow. Most of it ran down her cheeks, but some went down. That was something. He looked around frantically, trying to assess the situation. The barn suggested a homestead nearby, but he could see no house from this position, just empty prairie in 3 directions, and the barn blocking his view of the 4th. "Who did this to you?" he asked, though he was not sure she could answer. "Where's your house? Is there anyone who can help?" Helena's lips moved, forming words that came out as barely a whisper. "Husband. Gone. Left me." The words hit Harrison like a physical blow. A husband. A man had done this to his own wife and then abandoned her to bleed out alone like a wounded animal. Rage flooded through him, hot and immediate, but he forced it down. Anger would not help this woman survive. He made a quick decision. The nearest town was Victor, maybe 5 miles north. He could make it in less than an hour if he pushed hard, but moving her might kill her faster than leaving her here. Still, staying meant watching her die for certain. The bleeding was bad, worse than he had initially thought, and the sun would cook them both if they remained exposed like this. "I'm going to move you," he told her gently. "It's going to hurt like hell, but I need to get you to town. A doctor can save you, but you have to hold on. Can you do that for me?" Her eyes met his, and despite the agony written across her face, he saw something steel hard in their depths. A will to survive. She gave the tiniest nod. Harrison worked as carefully as he could, but there was no way to make it painless. He fashioned a makeshift stretcher from his bedroll and some rope, then eased her onto it with movements as gentle as handling a newborn calf. Every touch made her gasp or cry out, and by the time he had her secured, sweat poured down his face and his hands shook. He lashed the stretcher between his horse and a pack mule he had been leading, creating a travois that would drag behind them. It was rough transportation, but it was the best he could manage. The cattle would have to fend for themselves. A woman's life meant more than beef. The ride to Victor was the longest hour of Harrison's life. He kept the pace as steady as he dared, constantly looking back to check on Helena, talking to her to keep her conscious. He told her about the ranch he planned to start, about the land he had scouted near the mountains, about his mother back in Missouri, who made the best apple pie in 3 counties. Anything to keep her tethered to the living world. "You're going to taste that pie someday," he promised. "You hear me? You're going to sit at a proper table and eat proper food and never have to worry about getting hurt again. I swear it." Helena's eyes remained closed, but her lips moved occasionally, as if she was trying to respond. The bleeding had slowed thanks to the pressure bandages he had applied, but her skin had taken on a grayish pallor that terrified him. Victor emerged from the prairie like a mirage, a collection of wooden buildings clustered around a main street that was more mud than road, despite the summer heat. Harrison rode straight down the center of town, shouting for help, and people spilled out of the buildings to stare at the travois and its broken passenger. "Where's the doctor?" Harrison bellowed. "This woman needs help now." A portly man in a stained vest hurried forward. "Dr. Hendricks is 3 buildings down on the right. The blue door. Lord have mercy. What happened to her?" Harrison did not answer, already spurring his horse toward the indicated building. He pulled up outside and was off his mount before the animal had fully stopped. The door burst open before he could knock, revealing a gray-haired man with spectacles and a shrewd, intelligent face. "Bring her inside," Dr. Hendricks ordered, already assessing the situation with practiced eyes. "Carefully now. Set her on the table in the back room." Together they transferred Helena from the travois to the examination table. In the better light of the doctor's office, her injuries looked even worse. Her face was a mass of purple and black bruises, both eyes swollen nearly shut. Her breathing came in shallow, rattling gasps. "Who is she?" the doctor asked, washing his hands in a basin. "I don't know," Harrison admitted. "Found her bleeding out behind a barn about 5 miles south of here. She said her husband did this and left her." Dr. Hendricks's expression hardened. "Samuel Hayes. Has to be. He's got a homestead south of town, mean drunk with a temper. His wife Helena disappeared about a week ago. He told everyone she ran off with a traveling salesman. He began cutting away Helena's dress to better examine her wounds. Get some hot water boiling. There's a stove in the next room. And find Mrs. Chen at the laundry. Tell her I need her help." Harrison did as instructed, his mind reeling. A week. The bastard had told people she ran off while she lay dying behind his barn. If Harrison had not happened by when he did, she would be nothing but bones by now. Mrs. Chen arrived quickly, a small Chinese woman with quick, efficient movements and a face that revealed nothing of her thoughts. She disappeared into the back room with the doctor, and Harrison was left to pace the front office, listening to the muffled sounds of medical work being done. Hours crawled by. The sun sank toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded Harrison uncomfortably of blood. He had sent someone to look after his horse and cattle, barely paying attention to their assurances that everything would be handled. All he could think about was the woman on that table, fighting for her life. When Dr. Hendricks finally emerged, his sleeves were rolled up and blood stained his forearms. He looked exhausted, but not defeated, which Harrison took as a good sign. "She's alive," the doctor said, sinking into a chair. "Barely. 3 broken ribs, one of which punctured her lung. That's what was causing the blood from her mouth. Her left leg is fractured. Multiple contusions, both internal and external. She lost a tremendous amount of blood." He fixed Harrison with a steady gaze. "But she's got a fighting spirit, that one. With proper care, she might pull through. Might. The next few days will tell." Harrison felt something loosen in his chest. "Can I see her?" "She's unconscious. Mrs. Chen is sitting with her now. But yes, you can look in on her." The doctor paused. "You saved her life, young man. Another hour, and she would have been beyond help." "I just happened to be in the right place," Harrison said uncomfortably. "Perhaps, or perhaps something led you there." Dr. Hendricks stood and gestured toward the back room. "She'll need somewhere to recover once she's stable enough to leave here. The boarding house won't take her without payment, and I suspect she has nothing." "I'll pay for the boarding house," Harrison said immediately. "Whatever it costs. And when your money runs out?" Harrison had not thought that far ahead. He had some savings, enough to start his ranch, but medical care and long-term boarding would eat through it quickly. Still, he could not imagine simply abandoning her now. "I'll figure something out," he said firmly. Dr. Hendricks smiled slightly. "I believe you will. Go on, see your patient." The back room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn against the fading sunlight. Helena lay on a narrow bed, so still she might have been carved from marble. Someone had cleaned the blood from her face and hands, and proper bandages now wrapped her torso and leg. Mrs. Chen sat in a chair beside the bed, holding a damp cloth with which she occasionally dabbed at Helena's forehead. "She is not stirred," Mrs. Chen said quietly, "but her breathing is stronger. This is good." Harrison approached the bed, looking down at the woman he had saved. With the blood washed away, he could see that beneath the bruises, she was beautiful. Dark hair spread across the pillow, and her features, though swollen, were delicate and fine-boned. She looked younger than he had initially thought, perhaps 23 or 24. "What's your name?" Mrs. Chen asked. "Harrison Wright. I'm a cattleman, heading north to start a ranch." "You are a good man, Harrison Wright. Most would have ridden past." "I don't know about that." Harrison could not tear his eyes away from Helena's battered face. "Most men wouldn't have beaten their wife and left her to die. Samuel Hayes is not a man. He is a monster." Mrs. Chen's voice held quiet conviction. "I have seen the bruises on her when she came to town before. She always said she fell, or the horse kicked her, or she was clumsy. We all knew. But what could we do? She is his wife. The law does not protect wives from husbands." The words sat bitter in Harrison's mouth. He knew she was right. A man could do almost anything to his wife and face no consequences because she was his property in the eyes of the law. It was an injustice that had always troubled him, but he had never seen its results so starkly displayed. "She's not going back to him," Harrison said. It was not a question or a suggestion. It was a simple statement of fact. "No," Mrs. Chen agreed, "she is not. But he will come looking when he learns she lives. Men like Samuel Hayes do not like to lose their property. Let him come." Harrison's hand moved unconsciously to the gun at his hip. "I'll be ready." He stayed in that room until Mrs. Chen finally shooed him out, insisting that he needed food and rest. Harrison reluctantly agreed, taking a room at the boarding house and forcing down a meal he barely tasted. Sleep was impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Helena lying in that pool of blood, dying alone and abandoned. Before dawn, he was back at the doctor's office. Mrs. Chen had been replaced by an older woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Patterson, the doctor's wife. She reported no change in Helena's condition, which Dr. Hendricks assured Harrison was actually good news. No change meant she was stable, which was the first step toward recovery. Harrison fell into a routine over the next 3 days. He spent his mornings checking on his cattle, which were being held in a pen at the edge of town. A local rancher named Thomas Wade had offered to buy them at a fair price, and Harrison accepted, knowing he needed the money more than the herd now. In the afternoons and evenings, he sat at Helena's bedside, reading to her from newspapers and books borrowed from the general store, talking about anything and everything. "The paper says there's a new railroad line coming through Denver," he told her sleeping form on the third day. "Going to make shipping cattle a lot easier. Might change everything for ranchers in this territory." He paused, studying her face. The swelling had gone down considerably, and the bruises were starting to fade from purple-black to greenish-yellow. "You know, I think you're going to have brown eyes. That's my guess anyway. Can't really tell with them all swollen shut like that." He felt foolish talking to an unconscious woman, but Dr. Hendricks had said that some patients could hear even when they could not respond, and besides, it made Harrison feel less helpless to fill the silence with words. On the evening of the 4th day, Helena woke. Harrison had been dozing in his chair, exhausted from another restless night, when he heard a soft sound. His eyes snapped open to find Helena looking at him, or trying to. Her eyes were still mostly swollen shut, but there was unmistakable consciousness behind the slits. "Water," she whispered, her voice like sandpaper on wood. Harrison nearly knocked over his chair in his haste to grab the cup from the bedside table. He supported her head carefully, tipping water between her cracked lips. She drank greedily, then coughed, which made her cry out in pain. "Easy," Harrison soothed. "Easy now. Your ribs are broken. You have to move slow." Helena's hand came up, trembling, to touch her bandaged torso. Her breathing quickened, panic starting to set in. "You're safe," Harrison said quickly. "You're in Victor, in the doctor's office. Your husband is not here. You're safe." At the word husband, Helena's entire body went rigid. Her eyes, barely visible through the swelling, filled with terror. "He cannot hurt you anymore," Harrison continued, keeping his voice low and calm. "I found you behind the barn. I brought you here. Dr. Hendricks saved your life. "Samuel," she whispered, "he will come. Not while I'm here, he will not." Something in his tone must have reassured her, because she relaxed slightly. Her hand found his, gripping with surprising strength for someone so injured. "You saved me," she said. It was not a question. "I just happened to be riding by." "You saved me," she repeated, more insistently. A tear tracked down her bruised cheek. "I was dying. I felt it. The darkness was coming. And then there was a voice, pulling me back. Your voice." Harrison felt his throat tighten. "You saved yourself. You held on. You were strong enough to survive." "I wanted to die," Helena whispered, so quietly he almost missed it. "When I realized what Samuel had done, what he intended, I thought dying would be easier than this. But then you were there, and you told me I was going to live, and I believed you." They sat in silence for a long moment, her hand in his, while the lamp flickered and cast dancing shadows on the walls. "What's your name?" she finally asked. "Harrison Wright." "I'm Helena Hayes." She grimaced, "though I would prefer never to use that last name again." "Then you will not have to," Harrison said simply. "You're Helena, and that's enough." Over the next 2 weeks, Helena's recovery progressed slowly but steadily. The punctured lung healed, allowing her to breathe without the terrible rattling sound that had frightened Harrison so much in those early days. The broken ribs would take longer, the doctor warned, as would the leg. She would need to stay off it for at least 6 weeks, and even then she might walk with a limp for the rest of her life. Harrison moved his things from the boarding house to a small room above the general store, which was cheaper and closer to the doctor's office. He visited Helena every day, bringing her wildflowers he picked from the prairie, books to read, and news from the town. They talked for hours, learning each other's stories. Helena had grown up in Kansas, the daughter of a school teacher and a seamstress. She had married Samuel Hayes 3 years ago, when she was 21, and he had seemed like a good prospect. He owned a homestead, had money saved, and spoke of building a future. What she had not known was that he was a violent drunk who saw his wife as property to be controlled and punished. "The first time he hit me was 3 months after the wedding," she told Harrison one afternoon, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. "I had made dinner too late, and he had been drinking. He backhanded me so hard I saw stars. Then he cried and apologized and swore it would never happen again." "But it did," Harrison said quietly. "Again and again. Each time with a new excuse. I made him angry. I was clumsy. I did not show proper respect. After a while, he stopped making excuses. He hit me because he could, because I was his wife and no one would stop him." She looked at Harrison directly, her brown eyes clear now that the swelling had faded. "I tried to leave once, about a year ago. I made it as far as the road before he caught me. That time he broke my arm and locked me in the cellar for 3 days." Harrison felt his hands clench into fists. "Why didn't anyone help you?" "Because I was his wife, because marriage is sacred, and what happens between a husband and wife is their business. Because I had made my choice and had to live with it." Helena's voice held no bitterness, only a weary acceptance of the world's cruelty. "The week before you found me, I told him I was leaving. I had a little money saved, hidden in the barn. I was going to wait until he went to town and then run. But he found the money. He was so angry." She touched her ribs gingerly. "He beat me worse than ever before. I thought he was going to kill me that night, but he stopped and just walked away. The next morning, he dragged me out to the barn and started again. That's the last thing I remember clearly. Just pain, and then darkness, and then your voice." "I'm sorry," Harrison said, knowing the words were inadequate. "I'm sorry the world failed you so badly." "You did not fail me. You saved me." Helena reached out and took his hand, a gesture that had become comfortable between them. "You are a good man, Harrison Wright, better than I knew existed." Harrison felt heat rise in his face. He was not used to such direct praise, and he was increasingly aware that his feelings for Helena were growing beyond simple concern for an injured woman. She was intelligent, strong despite everything she had endured, and when she smiled, the whole room seemed to brighten. But she was also still recovering from terrible trauma, both physical and emotional. The last thing she needed was another man trying to claim her before she had even healed. "You would have done the same for me," he said, deflecting. "That's just basic human decency." "I am not sure I would have," Helena said honestly. "I am not sure I would have had the courage. For 3 years I walked past women in town who I suspected were suffering as I was, and I said nothing, did nothing. I was too afraid, too broken. You saw a stranger bleeding and risked everything to save her. That is not basic decency. That is heroism. I'm no hero. You are to me. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither was quite ready to name. Finally, Harrison cleared his throat and changed the subject, asking about the book she had been reading, and Helena allowed it, but something had shifted in the air between them. In the 3rd week of Helena's recovery, the thing they had both been dreading finally happened. Samuel Hayes came to town. Harrison heard about it first from Thomas Wade, who stopped by the general store where Harrison was working part-time to pay his rent. Samuel Hayes is down at the saloon, Thomas said in a low voice. Heard his wife's alive and staying at the doctor's. He's drunk and angry, making threats. Harrison felt ice water flood his veins. What kind of threats? Saying she's his wife, his property. Saying he has a right to take her home. Few of the boys are trying to talk sense into him, but you know how Samuel gets when he's drunk. Harrison was already moving toward the door. Stay here. Keep anyone from going to the doctor's office. Harrison, maybe you should get the sheriff. The sheriff will not do anything. A man has the legal right to his wife. Harrison checked his gun, making sure it was loaded. But legal does not make it right. He walked down the main street of Victor with purpose in every stride. The sun was setting, painting the buildings in shades of gold and amber. A few townspeople saw him coming and quickly moved out of the way. They knew trouble was brewing. The saloon was a squat wooden building with a covered porch where men gathered to drink and gamble away their wages. Harrison could hear Samuel Hayes' voice from outside, loud and slurred and mean. She's my wife. I got a right to her. If she's alive, she's coming home with me. Harrison pushed through the swinging doors. The saloon fell silent as he entered, all eyes turning to him. Samuel Hayes stood at the bar, a bottle in one hand. He was a big man, tall and broad-shouldered, with a florid face and small, mean eyes. Harrison could see why Helena had feared him. Samuel Hayes, Harrison said clearly. Your wife is not going anywhere with you. Samuel turned, swaying slightly. Who the hell are you? The man who found her bleeding to death behind your barn. The man who saved her life. The man who's going to make sure you never lay a hand on her again. A dangerous smile crossed Samuel's face. That's real noble of you, stranger. But she's my wife, legal and proper. I can do whatever I want with what's mine. She is not property, Harrison said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. She's a human being, and you nearly killed her. Should have finished the job, Samuel spat. Ungrateful bitch. I gave her everything. House, food, a name, and she repays me by trying to steal from me and run off. Harrison's hand moved to his gun. Walk away, Hayes. Walk away now and leave town. If you ever come near Helena again, I will put you in the ground. That's not a threat. That's a promise. Samuel laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You think you scare me, boy? I fought Indians and rustlers and every kind of hard case this territory could throw at me. You're nothing. Then draw, Harrison said flatly. The saloon erupted in movement as men scrambled to get out of the line of fire. Samuel's eyes widened, some of the drunken bravado fading as he realized Harrison was serious. You would not, Samuel said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. Draw or walk away. Choose. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Harrison's hand hovered near his gun, ready but not threatening. He had been in gunfights before, back in his younger days, and he knew the stillness that came before violence. He was not afraid. Samuel must have seen something in Harrison's eyes because he took a step back. This is not over. She's still my wife. No, came a voice from the doorway. I am not. Everyone turned. Helena stood in the entrance of the saloon, leaning heavily on a crutch that Dr. Hendricks had made for her. She was still pale, still bore the fading bruises of her beating, but she stood straight and tall, and her eyes blazed with fury. Helena! Harrison started, worried she had exerted herself too much by coming here. No, she said firmly. This is my fight, Harrison. Let me finish it. She turned her gaze to Samuel, who stared at her as if seeing a ghost. You tried to kill me, Samuel. You beat me and left me to bleed out like an animal, but I survived, and I will never, ever be your wife again. You do not get to decide that, Samuel snarled, but there was something shaken in his voice. Marriage is for life. Then I choose death, Helena said simply. I would rather die than spend another moment under your control. If you try to take me, I will fight. And if I cannot fight, Harrison will. And if you somehow manage to drag me back to that homestead, I will wait until you sleep and I will kill you myself. So go ahead, Samuel, claim your property, see how it works out for you. The silence in the saloon was absolute. Harrison had never heard a woman speak with such cold, controlled fury. Samuel looked genuinely frightened now. You're crazy, he said. You always were crazy. No, Helena replied. I was beaten and broken and terrified, but I am not anymore. I have stared death in the face and survived. You have no power over me now. Samuel looked between Helena and Harrison, clearly calculating his options. Whatever he saw made him decide that this was not a fight he could win. He threw the bottle against the bar where it shattered, then shoved his way toward the door. You will regret this, he spat at Helena as he passed. Both of you. The only thing I regret, Helena said quietly, is that I did not find the courage to leave you sooner. Samuel stumbled out into the darkening street. Harrison waited until he was sure the man was gone, then hurried to Helena's side. You should not be walking, he said, slipping his arm around her waist to support her. Dr. Hendricks said bed rest. I heard what was happening, Helena said, and he could hear the tremor in her voice now that the confrontation was over. I could not let you fight my battle alone. You should have trusted me to handle it. I did trust you. I trusted you to back me up while I told Samuel exactly what I thought of him. She looked up at Harrison, and there was something fierce and bright in her expression. I needed to stand up to him. For 3 years I cowered and apologized and tried to be small enough that he would not hurt me. I needed him to see that I am not afraid anymore. Harrison understood. This was not about him protecting her. This was about Helena reclaiming her own strength, her own agency. All he could do was stand beside her and make sure she was safe while she did it. Let's get you back to the doctor's, he said gently. As they walked slowly down the street, Helena leaning on both the crutch and Harrison's supporting arm, she said quietly, Thank you for everything, for saving my life, for staying, for being here tonight. I do not know how I will ever repay you. You do not owe me anything, Harrison said. I did what any decent person would do. No, Helena said. You did what only a truly good man would do. There's a difference. That night, lying in his small room above the general store, Harrison admitted to himself what he had been trying to ignore for weeks. He was falling in love with Helena Hayes. Not just attracted to her beauty, which was becoming more apparent as the bruises faded and her health returned. Not just admiring of her strength, though he had never met anyone braver. He was falling for everything about her, for the way she laughed at his terrible jokes, and the way she listened when he talked about his dreams for the future, and the way she had stood up to her abuser despite barely being able to walk. But she was still recovering, still healing from 3 years of abuse. She needed time and space, not another man making demands on her. Harrison resolved to keep his feelings to himself, to be her friend and protector, and nothing more until she was truly ready to make her own choices, free from fear and obligation. What he did not know was that in her room at the doctor's office, Helena was lying awake with the same realization. She was falling in love with Harrison Wright, and it terrified her more than Samuel ever had. With Samuel, she had mistaken charm for kindness, confidence for strength. She had married him thinking she knew what love was, only to discover she had chained herself to a monster. How could she trust her own judgment now? How could she be sure that what she felt for Harrison was real and not just gratitude or dependence or desperation? And yet, when she examined her feelings honestly, she knew they were different from anything she had felt for Samuel. Harrison never made her feel small or stupid. He never demanded anything from her. He treated her as an equal, someone whose opinions mattered, whose choices were her own. When he looked at her, she did not see possession in his eyes. She saw respect and warmth, and something that might be love reflected back at her. But was it too soon? Could she even trust herself to recognize love after everything that had happened? These questions haunted her as the days turned to weeks and her body continued to heal. Dr. Hendricks declared her well enough to leave his care, though she would need to continue being careful with her ribs and leg for several more weeks. The The question became where she would go. She could not return to the homestead. That was out of the question. The boarding house was an option, but it would require money she did not have. Harrison had already paid so much for her care, and she could not continue to rely on his charity indefinitely. "I need to find work," she told Harrison one afternoon as they sat on the bench outside the doctor's office. "Something I can do while I finish healing." "What kind of work did you do before?" Harrison asked. "My mother taught me to sew. I am good with a needle, and I can read and write, do figures. My father made sure I had an education." She paused. "I know it is not much." "That's more than most people have," Harrison said. "Mrs. Chen at the laundry was saying just last week that she needs help with mending and alterations. And the school teacher, Miss Parker, mentioned she could use an assistant since the school is getting more students." Helena felt a flicker of hope. "Do you think they would hire me?" "I think they would be lucky to have you." Harrison hesitated, then added, "But if you need a place to stay while you figure things out, I have an idea." He explained that Thomas Wade had offered him foreman work at his ranch, which would come with a cabin on the property. It was a small cabin, just 2 rooms, but there was a second smaller building that had been used for storage that could be cleaned out and made livable. "I am not suggesting we live together," Harrison added quickly, his face flushing. "That would not be proper, but you would have your own space, safe and secure, and you could work in town during the days. It would give you time to save money, decide what you want to do next." Helena studied his face. This man who had saved her life and asked nothing in return. She knew what people would say if she accepted. A woman living on the same property as an unmarried man, even in separate buildings, would cause talk. But she was already ruined in the eyes of society. She had left her husband or been left by him, depending on who was telling the story. Her reputation was damaged beyond repair. And more than that, she trusted Harrison. In a world that had shown her mostly cruelty, he had shown her kindness. If there was anywhere she would be safe, it was near him. "I accept," she said, "and thank you, Harrison, for everything." They moved to the Wade Ranch the following week. Harrison's new cabin was indeed small, but it was clean and sturdy, with a real wood stove and glass windows. The storage building was about 30 feet away, and with some work, Harrison transformed it into a cozy one-room living space for Helena. He built her a bed frame and a small table, hung curtains on the windows, and even constructed a shelf for books. "It is not much," he said apologetically as he showed her the finished space. "It is perfect," Helena said, and meant it. This little room was hers, truly hers, in a way no place had been for 3 years. No one could enter without her permission. No one could hurt her here. It was more precious than a mansion. She began working with Mrs. Chen 3 days a week, doing mending and alterations. The work was not physically demanding, which was good, because her ribs still pained her if she moved wrong. Mrs. Chen was a kind employer, patient as Helena learned the specific techniques she preferred. On the other days, Helena helped Miss Parker at the schoolhouse, preparing lessons and working with the younger children on their reading. The work was satisfying in a way that housework at Samuel's homestead had never been. She was contributing, earning her own money, making her own decisions. For the first time in years, Helena felt like a person rather than a possession. Harrison, meanwhile, threw himself into his work at the Wade Ranch. He was up before dawn and often did not return to the cabin until after dark, exhausted but satisfied. Thomas Wade was impressed with his knowledge and work ethic, and within a month had given him increasing responsibility for managing the ranch hands and making decisions about the herd. Despite their busy schedules, Harrison and Helena fell into a comfortable routine. They took meals together several evenings a week, taking turns cooking. Harrison turned out to be surprisingly good at making stew and cornbread, while Helena's biscuits were so light they practically floated. They talked easily about their days, about books they were reading, about their hopes for the future. And slowly, carefully, they fell deeper in love. It was not a dramatic or sudden thing. There was no lightning bolt moment of realization. Instead, it built gradually, like a flower opening to the sun. It was in the way Harrison always made sure to bring Helena wildflowers when he found them on his rides. In the way Helena mended his shirts without being asked, taking care to match the thread perfectly so the repairs were nearly invisible. In the way they found excuses to spend time together, taking walks in the evening when Helena's leg was strong enough, sitting together on the porch and watching the stars emerge. The people of Victor noticed, of course. Some approved, seeing a good man helping a woman who had been wronged. Others whispered and speculated about the true nature of their relationship. Helena learned to ignore the gossip. She had bigger concerns than what narrow-minded people thought about her living arrangements. Samuel Hayes, thankfully, seemed to have left the area. No one had seen him since that confrontation in the saloon. Rumor had it he had sold the homestead and moved north toward Wyoming, which suited Helena perfectly. The farther he was from her, the better. Autumn came to Colorado, painting the mountains in golds and reds. Helena's injuries had healed well, leaving only a slight limp that Dr. Hendricks assured her would fade with time. She had saved enough money to afford her own room at the boarding house if she wanted. But she found herself reluctant to leave the little cabin on the Wade Ranch. She told herself it was because the rent was cheap and the location convenient. But she knew the real reason. She did not want to leave Harrison. The question was whether he felt the same way. He was always kind, always respectful, but he had never said anything to suggest he saw her as more than a friend he was helping. Helena found herself watching for signs, analyzing every word and gesture, and feeling increasingly frustrated with her own uncertainty. The moment of truth came on a cold October evening. Helena had been invited to dinner at the Wade family's main house, along with Harrison. It was a celebration of the successful cattle drive to market, and Mrs. Wade had insisted on cooking a proper feast. The evening was warm and pleasant, full of good food and friendly conversation. As Harrison walked Helena back to her cabin afterward, she felt a nervous flutter in her stomach. The moon was bright overhead, and their breath made clouds in the cold air. Harrison had offered her his coat, which she wore draped over her shoulders, and she could smell his scent on it, leather and wood smoke and something indefinably him. That was a lovely evening, Helena said, more to break the silence than because it needed saying. Mrs. Wade sure can cook, Harrison agreed. That roast was incredible. They reached Helena's cabin and stood awkwardly on the small porch. This was usually where they said goodnight and went their separate ways, but tonight Helena found herself unwilling to let the moment end. "Harrison," she said, then stopped, unsure how to continue. "Yes, I wanted to thank you for everything you have done for me. I know I have said it before, but I do not think I can say it enough times to truly express how grateful I am." "You do not need to thank me." Harrison's voice was gentle. "I am just glad you are safe and healing. It is more than that, though." Helena took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "You have given me my life back, not just by saving me that day, but by helping me remember that I am worth saving, that I deserve kindness and respect and a future that does not include fear." Harrison looked at her intently, and in the moonlight his eyes were dark and serious. "You always deserved those things, Helena. You always have. I did not believe that before, but I believe it now, because you showed me." Helena's heart was hammering, but she forced herself to continue. "And I want you to know that what I feel for you is not just gratitude. Even though I am grateful, it is more than that. It has become more." She could see Harrison's breath catch, see the sudden tension in his shoulders. "Helena, you do not have to say this. You do not owe me anything. I am not saying it because I owe you. I am saying it because it is true." She stepped closer, looking up at him. "I am falling in love with you, Harrison Wright. Maybe I already have fallen, and I needed you to know." For a moment, Harrison just stared at her, and Helena felt panic rising. Had she misread everything? Was she about to make a fool of herself again? Then Harrison reached out and cupped her face gently in his hands, his thumbs brushing across her cheeks. "I am in love with you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I have been for weeks now, maybe longer. I did not say anything because I did not want you to feel pressured, did not want to be another man making demands on you when you needed space to heal." Relief and joy flooded through Helena in equal measure. "I do not feel pressured. I feel like I am finally making a choice that is truly mine." "Are you sure?" Harrison asked, searching her face. "Are you sure this is not too soon, that you are not just feeling obligated or dependent?" "I am sure," Helena said firmly. "I know my own heart, Harrison, and my heart wants you." He kissed her then, gentle and careful, as if she might break. Helena kissed him back, pouring all her hope and affection and newfound courage into the gesture. It was nothing like kissing Samuel had been. There was no possession in Harrison's touch, no demand, only tenderness and respect and love. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard and grinning like fools. "I have wanted to do that for so long," Harrison admitted. Then why did you wait? Helena teased. Because you are worth waiting for, worth doing things right. He grew serious again. I want to court you properly, Helena. I want to do this right, no matter what anyone says or thinks. I would like that, Helena said softly. I would like that very much. They stood together on the porch for a while longer, talking quietly about the future, making plans and promises. When they finally said goodnight, Helena floated into her cabin, feeling happier than she could remember being in years. The courtship that followed was the talk of Victor. Some people were scandalized by the speed of it, given that Helena was technically still married. Others pointed out that Samuel had abandoned her and nearly killed her, which surely voided any marital obligations. A few of the more old-fashioned residents muttered about impropriety and the decline of moral standards. Harrison and Helena paid the gossips no mind. They knew the truth of their feelings, and that was all that mattered. Besides, there were plenty of people in Victor who supported them. Mrs. Chen and Dr. Hendricks had become Helena's staunch defenders, and Thomas Wade made it clear that anyone who spoke ill of either Harrison or Helena in his hearing would answer to him. As winter set in, Harrison began making plans. He had saved money from his wages, and Thomas Wade had offered to sell him a parcel of land at a fair price. Come spring, Harrison wanted to start building his own ranch, the dream he had been working toward for years. I want you to help me plan it, he told Helena one snowy December evening as they sat by the fire in his cabin. I want it to be our ranch, our future. Our ranch? Helena repeated, her heart skipping. Harrison took her hand. I know we have not been courting long. I know there are complications with your marriage that need to be sorted out legally. But I also know that I want to spend my life with you, Helena. I want to build something with you. So, when you are ready, when the time is right, I am going to ask you to marry me, if you will have me. Tears sprang to Helena's eyes, but they were happy tears. I will have you, she whispered. When the time comes, my answer will be yes. The legal complications were not as difficult as they feared. Dr. Hendricks connected them with a lawyer in Denver who specialized in unusual cases. Given that Samuel had abandoned Helena and attempted to kill her, and given the testimony of the doctor and multiple witnesses about her injuries, the lawyer was confident he could secure a legal separation, if not an outright annulment. The process took months, requiring letters and documents and several trips to Denver for hearings. Harrison accompanied Helena to everyone, sitting beside her in the courtroom and holding her hand when she had to recount the details of her abuse. It was painful reliving those memories, but Helena found strength in Harrison's steady presence. In March of 1879, a judge signed the papers dissolving Helena's marriage to Samuel Hayes. She walked out of the courthouse a free woman, legally and finally. Harrison was waiting on the steps, and when he saw her face, he swept her into his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. It is over, she said. I am free. You are free, Harrison agreed, setting her down carefully. So, what do you want to do now? Helena looked up at him, at this good man who had saved her life and then shown her what love could really be. I want to go home, and then I want to start planning our wedding. They were married in June, when the wildflowers were in full bloom across the Colorado prairie. The ceremony was small, held in the church in Victor, with only their closest friends present. Helena wore a dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her sew, made of soft blue fabric that brought out her eyes. Harrison wore his best suit, brushed and pressed until it looked almost new. Dr. Hendricks gave Helena away, since her father was back in Kansas and the journey was too far and expensive to make. Mrs. Chen served as matron of honor, and Thomas Wade stood up for Harrison. The preacher kept the ceremony brief, sensing that these two people had already made their promises to each other, long before they stood in his church. When Harrison slipped the ring on Helena's finger, a simple gold band that had belonged to his grandmother, she felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was what marriage was supposed to be: partnership, respect, love, freely given and received. I love you, Harrison said, so quietly that only she could hear. I love you too, Helena replied, today and always. The kiss they shared sealed not just their marriage, but the promise of the future they would build together. They moved into a new house that summer, built on the land Harrison had purchased from Thomas Wade. It was modest but solid, with 2 bedrooms, a real kitchen, and a porch that looked out over the rolling prairie toward the mountains. Harrison had built it himself with help from friends, and every nail and board had been placed with care. Helena made it a home. She sewed curtains and quilts, planted a garden, filled the shelves with books. She continued her work with Mrs. Chen and at the schoolhouse, not because she needed the money, but because she enjoyed the work and the independence it gave her. Harrison never suggested she should stop working. He understood that her ability to choose her own path was precious to her, a hard-won freedom she had nearly died to obtain. The ranch prospered under Harrison's careful management. He started with a small herd of cattle and gradually built it up, reinvesting profits into more land and better stock. He earned a reputation as a fair employer and an honest dealer, and other ranchers sought his advice and partnership. Life was not without challenges. There were harsh winters and dry summers, sick cattle and broken equipment, all the trials that came with ranching in Colorado. But Harrison and Helena faced each challenge together, and that made all the difference. In the spring of 1880, Helena discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She had seen too many women die in childbirth, had heard too many stories of complications and tragedy. And there was a deeper fear, too. What if she could not be a good mother? What if the years of abuse had broken something fundamental in her? Harrison sensed her fears without her having to voice them. "You are going to be an amazing mother," he told her, holding her close. "I have seen how you are with the children at the school. They adore you, and for good reason." "But what if I am not strong enough?" Helena whispered. "What if something goes wrong? Then we will face it together, just like we face everything else." Harrison pulled back to look her in the eyes. "But I believe in you, Helena. You survived the impossible. You can do this too." Dr. Hendricks monitored her pregnancy carefully, remembering the damage her body had sustained. But Helena proved to be strong and healthy, and the pregnancy progressed without complication. On a cold December morning, after 12 hours of labor with Harrison pacing anxiously outside and Mrs. Chen acting as midwife, Helena gave birth to a son. He was small but healthy, with a powerful set of lungs that he demonstrated immediately. When Harrison was finally allowed into the room, he approached the bed with a look of such wonder and love that Helena felt tears spring to her eyes. She held up their son, wrapped in a soft blanket that she had knitted during her pregnancy. "Meet your father," she told the baby, then looked at Harrison. "Would you like to hold him?" Harrison took the baby with shaking hands, staring down at the tiny face with awe. "He is perfect," he breathed. "You are perfect, both of you." They named him Henry after Harrison's father, who had died when Harrison was young. Little Henry Wright had his father's dark hair and his mother's brown eyes, and from the start, he was loved beyond measure. Parenthood was exhausting and wonderful and terrifying in equal measure. There were sleepless nights and constant worry. But there was also incredible joy in watching Henry grow and change. His first smile, his first laugh, the first time he reached out deliberately to grasp Harrison's finger, all these moments felt like miracles. Helena discovered that her fears about being a good mother were unfounded. She was patient and loving, firm when necessary, but always kind. She sang lullabies and told stories, kissed scraped knees and celebrated small victories. And she never, ever raised a hand to her son in anger. The cycle of violence that had marked her marriage to Samuel would end with her. As Henry grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Harrison hired on additional help, including a young cowhand named James, who proved to be reliable and hard-working. The herd grew to over 200 head of cattle, and Harrison began experimenting with horse breeding as well. In 1882, Helena became pregnant again. This time, the news brought more excitement than fear, though she was still cautious. Dr. Hendricks once again monitored her carefully, but this pregnancy too progressed smoothly. Their daughter was born in the summer of 1883, during a thunderstorm that lit up the prairie with spectacular displays of lightning. She came into the world yelling, just as her brother had, and when Helena held her for the first time, she felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. "What should we name her?" Harrison asked, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. Helena had been thinking about this for months. "What about Hope? Because she represents everything we hoped for, everything we built together." Harrison smiled. "Hope Wright. It is perfect." Little Hope proved to be as spirited as her dramatic entrance suggested. She was curious and fearless, constantly getting into things and exploring her world with the determination of a general planning a campaign. Henry, now a protective older brother of nearly 3, appointed himself her guardian and could often be found following her around to make sure she did not get into too much trouble. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and harvests, of children growing and the ranch expanding. Harrison and Helena worked side by side, partners in every sense of the word. They made decisions together, shared responsibilities, supported each other through challenges. In 1885, when Henry was 5 and Hope was 2, they added a barn and expanded their house to include a 3rd bedroom and a proper dining room. The work was hard, but they had help from friends and neighbors, and when it was finished, they hosted a barn dance to celebrate. The whole town of Victor turned out, and there was music and dancing and enough food to feed twice the number of people present. As Helena danced with Harrison under the lantern light, surrounded by their friends and with their children playing nearby, she felt a profound sense of contentment. This life they had built was everything she had never dared to dream of during those dark years with Samuel. She was loved, respected, safe. Her children were healthy and happy. Her husband was her partner and best friend. "What are you thinking about?" Harrison asked, pulling her closer as the music shifted to a slower song. "About how far we have come," Helena said. "About how that day you found me bleeding in the dirt was the worst day of my life, and also the beginning of the best days of my life." Harrison's expression grew serious. "I think about that day too sometimes. About what would have happened if I had ridden a different direction, or if I had been an hour later." "But you did not," Helena said firmly. "You were there exactly when I needed you, and you saved me in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Harrison corrected gently. "You saved me from a life of wandering without purpose. You gave me a reason to build something permanent, something meaningful. You made me better than I was." They kissed, there in the middle of the dance floor with everyone watching, and Helena heard several people cheer. She did not care who saw or what they thought. She was proud of her love for this man, proud of the life they had created together. More years passed, marked by both joys and sorrows. In 1887, Helena's mother passed away in Kansas, and Helena made the long journey back for the funeral, bringing the children to meet the family they had never known. It was a bittersweet trip, tinged with grief, but also with the happiness of reconnection. Her father, now elderly and frail, was delighted to meet his grandchildren and clearly proud of what Helena had made of her life. "You have done well for yourself," he told her the night before she left to return to Colorado. "Better than I dared hope after we heard about Samuel. This Harrison sounds like a good man." "He is the best man," Helena said simply. "He gave me back my life." In 1888, they added a 3rd child to their family, another son they named William. His birth was the easiest of the 3, and he proved to be a calm, peaceful baby who rarely cried and seemed content to observe the world around him with solemn interest. The ranch was doing well enough now that Harrison could afford to hire a full-time foreman, which gave him more time to spend with his growing family. He taught Henry to ride and helped Hope with her letters, preparing her for school. He walked the land with William strapped to his chest in a carrier Helena had sewn, pointing out cattle and horses and telling his youngest son about the ranch he would someday help run. As the new decade approached, Harrison and Helena found themselves reflecting on the journey they had taken. It had been over 10 years since that terrible day in August 1878, when Helena had nearly died and Harrison had saved her. 10 years of building a life, a family, a legacy. "Do you ever regret it?" Helena asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. The children were asleep inside, and for once the house was quiet. "Regret what?" Harrison asked, puzzled. "Stopping that day, taking on the burden of a broken stranger. Your life would have been simpler if you had just ridden past." Harrison was quiet for a moment, considering. Then he shook his head firmly. "I would not change a single thing. Finding you was not a burden, Helena. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "I feel the same way," Helena said softly. "Every day I am grateful that you were the one who found me, that you were brave enough and kind enough to save me, and patient enough to love me when I did not know how to love myself." "You always knew how to love," Harrison said. "You loved yourself enough to want to live, to fight. You loved yourself enough to leave Samuel even though you knew how dangerous it would be. That took incredible strength. Helena leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him beside her. We make a good team, you and I. The best team, Harrison agreed, wrapping his arm around her. In 1890, they celebrated their 11th wedding anniversary with a trip to Denver, leaving the children in the capable hands of Mrs. Chen and her grown daughter. It was the first time they had been alone together for more than a few hours in years, and they reveled in the freedom of it. They stayed in a nice hotel, ate at restaurants, went to a theater performance. But the best part was simply being together, talking without interruption, remembering why they had fallen in love in the first place. Not that they had forgotten, but with 3 children and a ranch to run, it was easy to lose sight of the romance in the daily work of living. On their last night in Denver, as they walked back to the hotel through streets lit by new electric lights, Harrison stopped suddenly. "What is it?" Helena asked. "I just wanted to look at you," Harrison said. "Really look at you. Sometimes I get so caught up in everything we have to do that I forget to just appreciate how beautiful you are, how lucky I am." Helena felt herself blush, even after all these years. "I am not beautiful. I am 34 years old, with 3 children, and more gray hair than I would like to admit." "You are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen," Harrison said firmly. "You were beautiful when I found you broken and bleeding, because I could see your strength, and you are even more beautiful now, because I know your heart." He kissed her there on the street, and Helena kissed him back, grateful beyond words for this man, who had given her everything, her life, her freedom, her children, her happiness. The 1890s brought changes to Colorado and to Victor. The railroad expanded, making it easier to ship cattle to market, but also bringing more people west. Victor grew from a small town to a proper community, with new businesses and even a bank. The Wild West was becoming more civilized, more settled. Some of the old-timers complained about the changes, nostalgic for the rough and tumble days when the territory was still frontier. But Harrison and Helena welcomed the progress. They had seen enough of frontier violence. They were happy to live in a world where law and order prevailed, where women could walk the streets without fear, where children could grow up safe. Henry, now a young man of 14, showed a natural talent for ranching and worked alongside his father whenever he was not in school. He had inherited Harrison's steady temperament and Helena's keen intelligence, and it was clear he would make a fine rancher someday. Hope, at 11, was attending school and shocking everyone with her academic abilities. She wanted to be a teacher like Miss Parker, who had become a family friend and mentor. Helena encouraged her daughter's ambitions, knowing how important it was for women to have options and independence. William, now 6, was the dreamer of the family. He loved books and stories and spent hours drawing pictures of the animals on the ranch. Helena suspected he might become an artist or writer, and she made sure he had paper and pencils to nurture his creativity. In 1895, tragedy struck when Thomas Wade, Harrison's first employer and good friend, passed away after a sudden illness. It hit Harrison hard. Thomas had been like a father to him, the man who had given him his first real chance and believed in him when he was just a cowhand with dreams. At the funeral, Harrison spoke about Thomas's generosity and kindness, about how he had not just hired Harrison, but had mentored him, teaching him everything about ranching and business and being a good man. "Thomas Wade changed my life," Harrison said, his voice thick with emotion. "He gave me the opportunity to become the man I wanted to be. And he did that not just for me, but for dozens of men over the years. He believed in people, gave them chances, helped them build better lives. That is the legacy he leaves behind, and it is one I hope to honor in my own life." Helena stood beside him, holding his hand, lending him her strength, just as he had lent her his so many times over the years. After the funeral, as they walked back to their wagon, Harrison was quiet. "I want to do something," he said finally. "Something to honor Thomas's memory." "What are you thinking?" Helena asked. "I want to start a program for young men who want to learn ranching, but do not have the money or connections to get started. I want to hire them, train them, pay them fairly, and help them save enough to start their own operations someday. The way Thomas did for me." Helena smiled. "I think that is a wonderful idea. Thomas would be proud." They implemented the program the following spring, hiring on 2 young men from difficult circumstances and giving them not just jobs, but training and mentorship. Over the years, they would help dozens of young cowboys get their start, and many would go on to successful ranching careers of their own. As the century drew to a close, the Wright family was well established and respected in the community. Their ranch was one of the most successful in the area, known for quality cattle and honest dealing. Their children were thriving, each pursuing their own paths with the full support of their parents. In 1898, Henry announced his engagement to a young woman named Sarah Miller, whose family owned a neighboring ranch. The wedding was set for the following spring, and Helena threw herself into the preparations with the same energy she brought to everything. "I cannot believe our son is getting married," she told Harrison one evening as they reviewed the guest list. "He is 21, Harrison pointed out. "The same age I was when I started working ranches, old enough to know his own mind." "I know, but it seems like just yesterday he was a baby in my arms." Helena paused. "Do you think we did well by him? By all of them?" Harrison pulled her close. "I think we did the best we could, and that is all any parents can do. We loved them, taught them right from wrong, gave them opportunities. The rest is up to them." "You are right, of course." Helena smiled. "I am just being sentimental." "You are allowed to be sentimental," Harrison said. "Our firstborn is getting married. It is a big moment." The wedding in May of 1899 was a joyous affair, bringing together friends and family from across the territory. Henry looked handsome and nervous in his new suit, while Sarah was radiant in her white dress. As Helena watched her son take his vows, she felt a complex mix of emotions: pride, joy, a touch of sadness that her little boy was now a man. But mostly she felt grateful that her children would never know the kind of marriage she had endured with Samuel. Grateful that Henry had learned from Harrison what it meant to be a good husband, respectful, kind, a true partner. The cycle of violence had been broken. Her children would love and be loved in healthy ways. After the ceremony, as the celebration continued with music and dancing and feasting, Harrison found Helena standing at the edge of the crowd, watching their family and friends with a contemplative expression. "What are you thinking?" he asked, slipping his arm around her waist. "I am thinking about how far we have come," Helena said, "about all the moments that led us here. If even one thing had been different, if you had been riding a different direction that day, or if I had not survived, none of this would exist. Our children would not exist. This life we built would not exist." "But I did ride that direction," Harrison said gently, "and you did survive, and we built this life together. That is what matters." "I know." Helena turned to look at him, this man who had saved her in every way possible. His hair was now streaked with gray, and lines creased his face from years of working in the sun. But to her, he was as handsome as the day she had first truly seen him, sitting by her bedside and promising she would live. "I just want to make sure you know how much it all means to me. How much you mean to me, today and every day." "I know," Harrison said, kissing her forehead. "And you mean the same to me. You always have, from the very beginning." As the new century approached, bringing with it changes and challenges neither of them could predict, Harrison and Helena Wright faced it together, as they faced everything, hand in hand, heart to heart, united in love and purpose. The year 1900 arrived with celebrations across Colorado. There was talk of what the new century would bring, speculation about inventions and progress in the future. For the Wright family, the new century began with Hope's graduation from school. At 17, she had been accepted to a teaching college in Denver, the first in her family to pursue higher education. Helena helped her daughter pack for the journey with mixed feelings. She was proud beyond words that Hope had this opportunity, that her daughter would have choices in education and independence, but she would also miss her terribly. "You are going to do wonderful things," Helena told Hope the night before she left. "I am so proud of you." "I learned from the best," Hope replied, hugging her mother tightly. "You showed me that women can be strong and independent, that we do not have to accept the limitations others try to place on us." After Hope left for Denver, the house felt emptier. Henry had moved into his own home with Sarah, and they were expecting their first child, which would make Helena and Harrison grandparents. William was still at home, now 14, and increasingly interested in art and literature rather than ranching. "I do not think William is going to be a rancher," Helena observed to Harrison one evening. "No, I do not think so either," Harrison agreed. "But that is all right. He should follow his own path, whatever that may be." "You are a good father," Helena said. Not every man would be so understanding about his son not wanting to follow in his footsteps. I want my children to be happy, not to live out my dreams, Harrison said simply. And besides, ranching is not for everyone. It is hard work, and it requires a certain temperament. If William's talents lie elsewhere, he should pursue them. In the fall of 1900, Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby girl named Emma, making Harrison and Helena grandparents for the first time. Holding her tiny granddaughter, Helena felt the circle of life completing itself. She had survived, built a life, raised children, and now those children were beginning families of their own. "She is perfect," Helena whispered, gazing down at Emma's sleeping face. "She looks like you," Harrison said, standing beside her. "I hope she has an easier life than I did," Helena said quietly. "She will," Harrison assured her, "because she has parents who love her and will protect her, and grandparents who will spoil her thoroughly." He was right. Emma was doted on by everyone in the family, and as she grew, more grandchildren followed. Sarah and Henry had 2 more children over the next few years, while Hope eventually married a fellow teacher and started her own family in Denver. William, as expected, pursued a different path. After finishing school, he moved to Denver to study art, eventually becoming a successful illustrator for newspapers and magazines. His parents could not have been prouder. As Harrison and Helena grew older, they gradually handed over more of the ranch operations to their foremen and the experienced hands they had trained. They still lived on the property, still advised and consulted, but the daily work fell to younger shoulders. This gave them time to enjoy each other's company in a way they had not been able to since the early days of their marriage. They took walks together every evening, weather permitting, talking about everything and nothing. They read books aloud to each other in the evenings. They visited their children and grandchildren, delighting in watching the next generation grow. In 1910, as they celebrated their 31st wedding anniversary, Helena reflected on the improbable journey that had brought them to this moment. 31 years since that night in the saloon, when she had told Samuel she would never be his wife again. 32 years since Harrison had found her bleeding and dying and refused to let her slip away. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" Helena asked Harrison as they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. "I said a lot of things that day," Harrison replied. "Which part?" "You told me I was going to live. You told me I was not dying that day. You said it with such certainty, as if you could command death itself to stand back." Harrison smiled. "I remember. I was terrified you would not make it, but I refused to accept it. You were going to live because I willed it to be so." "And I did live," Helena said, "because you believed in me when I had stopped believing in myself. You gave me a reason to keep fighting." "We gave each other reasons," Harrison corrected. "You showed me what real strength looks like. You survived the impossible and came out the other side not bitter or broken, but kind and loving. You inspired me every day." Helena took his hand, feeling the familiar calluses, the strength that had held her up so many times. "We have had a good life, have we not?" "The best life," Harrison agreed. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." They sat together in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars began to appear. Around them, the ranch they had built together hummed with life. Cattle lowing in the distance, horses moving in their corrals, the sounds of the hands finishing their work for the day. This was their legacy, Helena thought. Not just the physical ranch, though that was impressive enough, but the family they had raised, the young men they had trained and helped get their start, the community they had contributed to. They had taken a moment of terrible violence and transformed it into something beautiful and lasting. "I love you," she told Harrison, as she had told him thousands of times over the decades. "I love you too," Harrison replied, kissing her hand. "Today, tomorrow, and always." As the years continued to pass, Harrison and Helena remained devoted to each other and to their ever-expanding family. Their children thrived, their grandchildren grew, and eventually great-grandchildren arrived, filling the family gatherings with noise and laughter and joy. They never forgot where they had started, that desperate day in August 1878 when everything changed. Helena still bore the scars, both physical and emotional, of what she had endured. Her legs still ached when the weather changed, and sometimes she had nightmares about Samuel's fists and boots. But those scars were also reminders of her strength, of her survival. She had looked death in the face and refused to yield. She had rebuilt her life from nothing and created something extraordinary. Those scars were badges of honor, proof that she was a survivor. Harrison still sometimes woke in the night from dreams of finding Helena too late, of being unable to save her. In those moments, he would reach out in the darkness to make sure she was there, solid and real and breathing beside him. And she would wake and hold him, soothing his fears just as he had once soothed hers. They understood each other in ways that went beyond words. They had saved each other, had chosen each other, had built a life together against all odds. That bond was unbreakable, forged in blood and pain, and ultimately in love. In the summer of 1915, they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary with a party that brought together 4 generations of family and friends from across Colorado. The ranch was decorated with ribbons and flowers, and tables groaned under the weight of food prepared by dozens of willing hands. Helena, now 69 years old, wore a new dress made by Hope, who had inherited her mother's talent with a needle. Harrison, at 73, still stood tall and strong, though his hair was now completely white, and he moved a bit more slowly than in his youth. As they stood together to cut the anniversary cake, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, Helena felt a profound sense of completion. This was what she had nearly died without knowing: the love of a good man, the joy of children and family, the satisfaction of a life well lived. "Speech!" someone called, and others took up the cry. Harrison looked at Helena, who nodded her encouragement. He cleared his throat, and the crowd fell silent. 50 years ago, Harrison began, I married the most extraordinary woman I have ever known. But our story started a year before that, on a day that changed both our lives forever. He paused, his eyes finding Helena's. I found her when she needed help most desperately. I like to think I saved her life that day, but the truth is, she saved mine too. She gave me purpose, love, family. She made me want to be a better man, and then she helped me become one. He took Helena's hand, raising it to his lips. These 50 years have been the greatest adventure of my life. We have built something extraordinary together, not just this ranch, but this family, this legacy of love and strength. And I would not change a single moment of it. Helena felt tears streaming down her cheeks. You gave me my life back, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. You showed me what love really means, and every day since has been a gift I treasure. They kissed, to the cheers and applause of everyone present. And as Harrison held her close, Helena thought about how improbable their story was, how easily it could have ended differently, how lucky they were to have found each other. But it had not ended differently. They had found each other, loved each other, built a life together, and that life had been everything neither of them had dared to hope for, full of love and joy and meaning. As the celebration continued around them, with music and dancing and laughter echoing across the prairie, Harrison and Helena stood together, hand in hand, looking out at the legacy they had created. Their children were happy and successful. Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren were healthy and loved. The ranch would continue for generations to come, a testament to what they had built together. No regrets? Harrison asked softly. Not a single one, Helena replied. Not one moment, not one choice. It has all been perfect because I lived it with you. They remained on the ranch for the rest of their days, growing old together with grace and dignity. When Harrison passed away peacefully in his sleep, in 1920, at the age of 78, Helena mourned him deeply, but also celebrated the extraordinary life they had shared. She knew how lucky they had been, how rare their love was. She followed him 2 years later, surrounded by family, her hand held by Hope as she took her last breath. Her final words were about Harrison, about how she was ready to see him again, how she had missed him every day since he had gone. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a sky as blue and endless as the one that had witnessed their first meeting all those decades ago. The headstones were simple, bearing their names and dates and a single phrase that summed up their entire story. Together, always. The ranch continued for generations, passed down through their children and grandchildren, each generation adding to the legacy that Harrison and Helena had started. The story of how they met, how he had saved her life, and how they had built something extraordinary together, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. And in Victor, Colorado, where it had all begun, Old-timers still told the story of Harrison Wright and Helena Hayes, of the cowboy who had refused to let a dying woman slip away, and the woman who had survived against all odds. It was a story of courage and survival, of love triumphing over violence, of two people who had found each other in the darkest moment and created light. Their love story became a testament to the power of human kindness, to the possibility of healing and hope even after the worst trauma. It reminded people that it is never too late to change your life, to choose love over fear, to build something beautiful from the wreckage of the past. And so, the story lived on, generation after generation, a reminder that even in the wild and often brutal West, love could flourish and endure, that one moment of compassion could change everything, that two broken people could save each other and create something whole and lasting. Harrison and Helena Wright had lived a full and rich life, had loved deeply and completely, had left behind a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. Theirs was a love story for the ages, born from tragedy, but ultimately defined by joy, partnership, and enduring devotion. They had promised to be together always, and that promise had been kept, from the day he found her dying until the day she breathed her last, and beyond, into whatever eternity awaited them. Together, always, just as they had vowed. Together in life, in death, and in the memories and legacy they left behind.